everybody, welcome back to Mindful Drawing. This is the second one. I love doing them so much that I've decided even if no one's going to watch them, I'm going to continue making these. So I hope you enjoy. All right, with that being said, let's get into the post. So, our first post is titled, How do you actually communicate with your feelings to a therapist? This is the question. So the poster says, talking about my issues with my friends, easy. My therapist, virtually impossible. That's literally the purpose of a therapy, but for some reason, I can't bring myself to talk about the nitty gritty. I talk to him about the things of my life, but I'm never actually able to talk about how I'm feeling or how it's impacting me. I choke up and can't do it. I can't talk about my deeper issues, which I know is something I need to bring up but can't ever do. I feel like this is something pretty common in therapy. I know even for me, someone who's had lots of different like counselors and therapists and psychiatrists, it's hard to initially open up to someone, especially a stranger. I think the reason why it's easier for you to open up to your friends and not a therapist is not necessarily because like the function of your, not to say the function of your friends and your therapist isn't the same when it comes to sharing your feelings, but it's the trust. You haven't probably developed the trust or the vulnerability to open up to them as yet. I just think in a lot of cultures, we don't value opening up and exposing ourselves to people. A lot of people see it as a weakness to be vulnerable with their emotions and their thoughts, so they're used to keeping it close to their chest. Which, while in the short term, it's good for productivity, in the long term, it tends to be detrimental to our mental and even to an extent our physical health. But I also don't think you should rush into exposing yourself to a stranger, even if it is a therapist and it's their paid job to listen to your problems. I think you should sort of start off slow with talking about your feelings to your therapist. I've known people who will go into therapy the first few sessions and kind of talk about mundane things and then sort of ease into the deeper issues or maybe an underlining conflict that they've had that might in severity be a little low, just to sort of gauge what the therapist, how the therapist might react. For example, you might start off talking about your day and how you thought, just like in the afternoon, you got a little upset because you thought about an argument you had with a friend or a family member. And then gauging from the therapist's reaction, maybe they might push you a little bit or make a face or whatever the reaction is. Then I think you can sort of gauge how their reaction makes you feel and if you want to continue telling them about like that particular feeling or any particular feelings you might have about anger or sadness or depression or whatever it might be. I also feel like not every therapist is made equal. There are just some therapists who you feel safer with than others, and if you get to a point where you're months in to sessions with a particular therapist or psychiatrist and you don't feel comfortable, there's nothing wrong with wanting to switch or change practices or maybe just ask for a new therapist if you're in a clinic where there's multiple, therapists you can pick from. And I'm not sure about your gender, but some people feel more comfortable talking to women, even men. A lot of men feel more comfortable talking to a woman because they feel like women are more empathetic as opposed to men. Some men feel more, inclined to talk to another man about their feelings because it's like they don't want to feel like they're judged. even though like whatever your preconceptions are to opening up to somebody, I think you should follow them, even though it's like, yeah, they're a therapist and their function is going to be the same, which is to listen to you and give like clinical advice and sometimes even life advice. It's more helpful for you if you go with your gut feeling about a therapist. In the meantime, I would suggest, like, if you feel you're choking on your emotions and your thoughts and you can't necessarily get them out to your therapist, still lean on your friends. And I feel like I've said this a million times on this channel, but just get a journal. Journaling is so helpful. It's kind of like, personally, I am so bad keeping a journal, but I do know the benefits of having one, just to like let go of any thoughts or feelings that might just be, cluttering your brain at any given moment. Also, just like having a journal could help with, like you practicing getting your emotions out, and in a way where you don't necessarily feel like judged by someone. That could also be helpful in that way as well. Okay, so the next post is called "Nothing Can Be Built on a Weak Foundation" with the opinion and thoughts flare. The poster says, "People often note that poverty makes long-term financial planning difficult. The same limitations exist for pre-agricultural sapient tribes, whose survival demands narrowed their planning horizons. At a deeper level, this reflects present value calculations applied through human needs, not just economic ones. I came to this realization through my own mental health struggles. During periods of intense depression, most of my mental energy is spent simply getting through the day. When so much effort is required just to stay afloat, how can anything long-term or substantial be built?" I really love this post. A lot of us tend to blame ourselves on our lack of willpower or our lack of emotional bandwidth, or our lack of discipline on like why we cannot get certain things done or be as productive as we want to be. But even though this take is not necessarily new, I think it's quite interesting, and I appreciate that they're not beating themselves up. I mean, first thing I thought of was Maslow's hierarchy of needs when I read this question. If you're not familiar with the hierarchy of needs, it's essentially 5 categories that are in the shape of a pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid is psychological needs, and going upwards would be safety, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and at the tippy top, self-actualization. So the idea behind it is, once you've satisfied the baser needs at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the ability to climb upwards and satisfy the other needs, and ultimately the goal would be self-actualization. I think there's exceptions to the rule in thinking like this, as far as, how could you focus on, making art if you're not necessarily financially doing well? And I think many of us can think of many examples of broke artists, people who don't even know where their next meal is coming from, but they have the mental capacity to make art and think about things other than like, when is money coming in, when am I gonna get my next meal, where's the next shelter gonna be for me? I always think about, because when we think about self-actualization, right, we always think about morality, creativity, self-acceptance, and having meaning and inner potential within ourselves. However, there's definitely ways I think you can go about creating meaning for yourself without necessarily feeling like you have love or belonging or safety and security. or any of the, baser needs. I think one of the ways you could do this is being in service to people and to populations maybe who don't necessarily have what you have. For example, like maybe serving at a food pantry, or at a church, or at a hospital with people who are sick who need help. There's something about volunteering and being in service to people that does give you meaning, even if you don't have much to give yourself. That is very fulfilling, at least to me. I think that's why I enjoy like talking about mental health and sharing my experiences, because I do feel as if someone out there will hear this and maybe not necessarily learn something completely brand new, but at least be reminded of, hey, I need to do this to like better my mental health. Or yeah, oh, I forgot, like I always thought about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but now I'm thinking about it again and I'm trying to apply it to my life. In a way, I do see like a series like this that I would do as being in service to a broader community, definitely not necessarily to myself, even though I do definitely enjoy doing this kind of thing. And obviously be of service within your means. No one's telling you to give, a complete stranger the shirt off your back. Do it in increments that feel comfortable to you. And I believe in the ethos of, if you can be kind to others, it'll teach you how to be kind to yourself and to give meaning to yourself. Okay, y'all, I think that's it. I'm gonna try to keep this one a little brief just to see if it reaches more people. The last one was like 30 minutes and not many people watched, but I think it's the length. I think it was the length, and maybe not necessarily the algorithm knowing like who to place this in front of. Who knows? But regardless, I definitely want to keep doing this series. I hope that it's helpful to anyone, and I would love to keep talking about mental health. It's just it's like to just make a video out of like thin air, like with a topic about just some random thing, feels a little daunting. With at least the posts, I can sort of like have something to bounce off of and go off on and like present a more solid idea, which I think would be helpful. And I'm assuming that if one person is asking this on Reddit, then there's definitely people who have these questions or thoughts and ideas and need advice. So yeah, I'm here to help. Okay, thank you for watching and taking time out of your day as always. Hope you have a good night or a good morning or a good day. Okay, bye. See you in the next one.